300,000 tons of soybeans just landed in China, then got turned away at the dock. Not because they were rotten, not because they were mislabeled, but because China's AI customs system said they came from the United States, even though the paperwork said Argentina. Within hours, Beijing exposed a global fraud attempt that's now sparked a $200 million trade backlash, crushed Argentina's exports, and left U.S. farmers with nowhere to hide. But here's the twist. This wasn't the first time, and it's definitely not the last. April 2025. A bulk carrier docks in Tianjin, hauling 300,000 tons of soybeans labeled from Argentina. Within 24 hours, China rejects the entire shipment, not due to pests or spoilage, but because their customs AI flagged the beans as likely American. This wasn't a guess. According to Chinese customs officials, internal traceability systems showed discrepancies between declared and expected protein profiles, and that set off alarms. Beijing then released a rare public accusation. The soybeans had likely originated in the United States and were re-exported through Argentina to bypass tariffs. But what exposed the origin swap? And why did it escalate so quickly? Because the soybean trade isn't just about agriculture anymore. It's a theater for economic espionage. With Trump's administration imposing a 145% tariff on Chinese goods by April 2025, Beijing retaliated with duties up to 15% on American crops, including wheat, beef, and soybeans. U.S. soybean exports plummeted down from 36.1 million tons in 2016 to just 22.1 million in 2024, a 39% collapse. In that vacuum, desperate exporters turned to third country laundering. The alleged workaround route American soybeans to Argentina repackage them with altered certificates of origin, then re-export them to China as Argentine commodities. This backdoor method aimed to mask U.S. identity under the cover of Argentina's legitimate soybean trade, which totaled over 4.1 million tons to China in 2024 alone. But the smokescreen was flawed, and Chinese inspectors weren't buying it. Customs officials didn't need months of lab work to spot the deception. They leveraged a national traceability system, upgraded in 2024, using AI pattern recognition and high-precision protein analysis. Argentine soybeans rarely exceed 34% protein. The shipment in question clocked in at 35.1%, a chemical signature consistent with U.S. Midwest production, particularly from Illinois and Iowa, where agronomic conditions and genetics consistently produce higher protein yields. Further evidence. The sacks were manufactured in the United States, and GPS tracking suggested the cargo didn't originate in Argentina at all. According to Customs internal audit logs, over 98% of flagged shipments using this multi-point detection system have matched forensic origin investigations. So, if the data told the story, how often has this story repeated? It wasn't. In late 2024, China intercepted a 200,000-ton shipment bearing Argentine paperwork that unraveled in under 48 hours. The signs were eerily similar. Identical protein content anomalies, reused U.S. freight bags, and route inconsistencies traced through maritime GPS logs. Both shipments relied on paper certifications that didn't align with logistical reality. These were not isolated errors. They were coordinated maneuvers, banking on procedural gaps that no longer exist. And China's upgraded customs apparatus isn't reactive, it's predictive. AI flags abnormalities in real time by cross-referencing biochemical, transactional, and logistical databases. And this time, the backlash hit more than just the U.S. exporter. After the rejection, Chinese buyers pulled back immediately. Contracts were frozen. And according to Argentina's Ministry of Agriculture, nearly $200 million in soybean trade evaporated within days. Buenos Aires, blindsided, filed a formal complaint with the WTO, accusing U.S. exporters of commercial sabotage and reputational damage. Argentina's reliance on China is not trivial. In 2024, over 70% of Argentina's soybean exports, 4.1 million tons, went directly to China. When China's customs flagged the rebranded U.S. cargo, Argentina became collateral damage in a trade war it didn't initiate. This put pressure on Argentine growers, especially mid-size exporters, whose entire logistics chains were pegged to consistent Chinese demand. Now, they're being asked to prove their beans are truly theirs and not American ghosts. In response, Argentina began negotiations with China to build a certified traceability system, one backed by blockchain GPS logging and biometric lot tagging. But China's already several steps ahead. Its custom system doesn't just track shipping origin. It triangulates soil isotope markers, seed genetics, and protein expression curves to map commodity origin with a 98% match rate. Meanwhile, the WTO held a special session in December 2024 to propose global verification standards following the rise in origin forgery cases. Still, enforcement gaps persist. Experts from Bloomberg Intelligence warn that unless such standards are universally adopted and backed by trade penalties, the incentives to cheat, especially with soybean futures in flux, remain strong. But is it too late to restore credibility to the system when bad faith is baked into the supply chain? It didn't stop with Argentina. In late 2024, Chinese customs intercepted 200,000 tons of soybeans labeled Brazilian, only to uncover through blockchain records and isotopic fingerprinting that they had originated in the U.S. Midwest. The re-export strategy was slightly modified. U.S. beans were mixed with Brazilian stock, repackaged with Brazilian export certificates, and shipped to China. But the plan collapsed under scrutiny. China's port of Shandong flagged 3 such cargoes in Q4 2024 alone, totaling over 20 million yuan in value. Customs used plot-level data, shipping trajectories, and digital birth certificates introduced under Brazil's 2023 Traceability Pact. By February 2025, China issued a formal warning. Any verified resale of U.S. soybeans via Brazil would trigger punitive tariffs and export quota reductions. So if the back doors are closing, how are U.S. exporters staying afloat? The numbers paint a stark picture. U.S. soybean production fell from 119 million tons in 2016 to 100 million in 2024. During that same period, exports to China plunged 39%, slashing $4.5 billion from annual revenue. According to USDA reports and Bloomberg's AgriTrade Index, surpluses are accumulating in Midwest silos, while domestic prices hover near 10-year lows. In response, U.S. merchants have turned to speculative blending, third-country swaps, and indirect freight routes through Panama and West Africa. But these options are shrinking as China's customs network builds what the Financial Times called a real-time global soybean DNA ledger. Without direct access to the world's top buyer, China accounted for 66% of global soybean imports in 2024. American producers are increasingly boxed in. But if the U.S. is losing market share, who's gaining, and why Brazil is rapidly absorbing the gap? In 2024, China bought over 74 million tons of Brazilian soybeans, nearly 70% of its total import volume, at a cost of $26,936 billion, according to China's General Administration of Customs. Argentina, though, smaller, contributed 4.1 million tons that same year. The U.S., once a dominant supplier, saw its share dwindle to 22.12 million tons, a 14 million ton drop from its 2016 peak. China's shifting preference is not just about tariffs. It's about risk mitigation. Unlike the U.S., both Brazil and Argentina have agreed to joint traceability mechanisms allowing for near-instant verification of supply chain integrity. With Beijing prioritizing food security through tighter import controls, this transition isn't temporary. It's strategic. And China isn't just shifting suppliers. It's reshaping how prices are set. China isn't reacting to markets. It's starting to control them. In February 2025, when Brazilian exporters tried to inflate prices by citing crop stress from erratic rainfall, China responded by releasing national reserves and canceling advance orders, triggering a 7% drop in futures within 72 hours, according to Bloomberg Commodities. More importantly, China's customs now monitors global soybean prices in real time using a proprietary database that flags anomalies. If Brazilian prices rise without global justification or close within 5% of U.S. quotes, the system triggers an audit and supply review. This tight monitoring has created what the Wall Street Journal called a shadow pricing mechanism, where China effectively dictates acceptable margins through soft threats of contract suspension. But how does this affect the rest of the supply chain, including those far outside politics? Behind every tariff, war supply reroute, and rejected shipment lies a ripple of quiet damage. In the U.S., small and mid-sized soybean cooperatives, especially in Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota, have seen international contracts dry up. The National Farmers Union reports that over 11% of these farms are now operating below break-even due to lost Chinese demand. In Argentina, producers report tighter credit conditions and strained shipping logistics as a result of reputational fallout from the re-export scandal. Chinese consumers aren't spared either. Food inflation rose 4.2% year over year in Q1 2025, with soy-based products like tofu and feedstock for pork producers climbing sharply. The IMF has warned that sustained disruptions in grain trade could shave 0.3% off global GDP by 2026. So what's the end game if the U.S. keeps getting blocked? If the United States remains locked out of the world's largest soybean buyer, the consequences will be structural, not just cyclical. According to Rabobank's 2025 Agri-Finance Outlook, prolonged exclusion from China's market could force U.S. producers to scale down planning by up to 5 million acres by 2026. More urgently, it may trigger a consolidation wave as only the largest agribusiness firms can absorb pricing volatility and logistics overhead. Meanwhile, China is actively diversifying increasing contracts with Paraguay, boosting domestic yields via gene-edited seeds and investing in port facilities in West Africa to open new supply corridors. For American exporters, the message is clear. Either rebuild trust and comply with China's new data-driven protocols or risk permanent decoupling from a $50 billion import economy. But if you think soybeans are the final straw, think again. If soybeans got rejected for hiding their origin, what happens when Beijing exposes what's actually inside U.S. genetically modified corn? We're talking genetically modified U.S. corn under new scrutiny, just as Beijing begins rewriting biotech approval rules. This trade war isn't cooling off. It's mutating. And if you're still watching this, thinking it's just about agriculture, you're missing the bigger picture. So ask yourself if the world no longer trusts the label made in the USA. How much longer before that mistrust spreads from food to finance? Because what's coming next could shake the foundation of global trade. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.